Now we're talking about sea level here. Sea level is measured at Cornwall, England. It's a couple hundred years ago. England was kind of running things when it came to oceans, and they got to pick where to measure sea level, and they measured it at they got a big rock. There's a line there. That's sea level. It turns out that sea level varies as much as 494 feet up and down from that rock in Cornwall, England. Now that's like a 50-story building. I mean, it's a lot of water. And there's a bulge of literally millions of cubic miles, 1 mile by 1 mile by 1 mile, cubic miles. Millions of cubic miles of water bulge at the equator of this planet. It wasn't common knowledge for John Moore, I found out. It's not common knowledge for most people. It's held in place by two things, the rotation of the Earth and gravity. Anything that changes our true north, our pole, by more than just a couple of degrees will cause that water to be disrupted. And there's a technical term for it, slosh. And there's records locked up in bones and stone of this having happened in the past. Velikovsky talked about it extensively in his books. Talk a little bit about this water damage. You have a map in your handout. Now, from Washington, D.C. to Boston is basically one big city. Since World War II, that's what it's become. One big city. All that's going to be gone. Going down the coast to Atlanta and down to Florida. Florida, the highest point in Florida is on the Panhandle, 55 feet above sea level. Florida's finished, except for a small part of the isthmus, maybe. And that's a big maybe. Gulf Coast, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi are pretty much going to be gone. In fact, the new mouth of the Mississippi will be at the current Arkansas-Louisiana state line, a couple hundred miles up from where it is right now. Going down around the coast of Texas, Texas will take damage about 100 miles inland. California will take damage 25 to 100 miles inland, depending on a couple of things, the level of the altitude above sea level and seismic activity. On up the west coast to Oregon and Seattle, all coastal areas being damaged 50 to 100 miles inland. And once again, seismic activity is going to play a big role in what happens. Locally in the Midwest, we have something called the New Madrid seismic zone. Once the Mississippi River becomes 50 to 100 miles wide, the U.S. Navy, not John Moore, the U.S. Navy says it will trigger at least 3 9-point plus earthquakes on the New Madrid seismic zone. Southern Illinois will basically be one large swamp. In fact, southern Illinois is already pretty swampy. If you fly over the Mississippi River right now, you can see where the river used to be. You can see where its banks were at one time. A much, much larger river than it is now. I mentioned Wisconsin will be gone. The Great Lakes will become one vast inland sea joining up with Hudson Bay up in Canada. That's what the Navy says. And it's kind of ironic and kind of caught my attention when all of these Navy veterans, these submarine veterans, they all look at this map and they say, John, Wisconsin's gone. It's finished. There's not going to be any more Wisconsin. Florida's gone. Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, finished, gone. Okay, I need a volunteer. Who wants a free copy of my book? Clyde, come on up. You can just stand here, Clyde, and when I ask you the questions, you can give your answers, whatever answer you see fit. You're going to get the book anyway. Okay. Now, I've got some products here in this box, since you volunteered, you're going to get the chance to be well hard about lab rats and guinea pigs. Clyde's going to be our guinea pig here. This first product is spectricide, insecticide. Now, there's a point I'm going to be making here, ladies and gentlemen, and here's the point. Sometimes secrets are hidden in plain sight. if you can't keep it in the file cabinet locked up, sometimes you have to hide them in plain sight. Now, this stuff will kill all these, I mean, pretty much any kind of bug there is. Okay? And it says here, if you swallow it, you should call poison control. I mean, that's reasonable, right? Okay. Now, I've got a Q-tip here. Now, if I open this up, and would you allow me to swab it underneath your tongue?
No.
You don't have to swallow it, just, so I'll swab it and then you spit it out. Would you go for that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm scared of that.
Okay. This is a smart man here. Now I've got 2 more products in the box there. And they also have insecticide in them. In fact, I'm going to read what the effects are of this. If you get this stuff in you, death, nausea, vomiting, abdominal distress, diarrhea, stupor, weakness, muscular weakness, tremors, convulsions, respiratory cardiac failure. Now, I'll make the same offer to you, Clyde. These 2 products here that have this insecticide on it. Just a little swab underneath the tongue. You pass on that? Okay. Now, these. Well, this isn't medicine. This is. Now it says right on here, just like the insecticide, it says if you swallow the product, that you should call poison control. Because, in fact, this insecticide and this product, they can't sell it as a separate product as insecticide anymore. It's too dangerous. It used to be. I mean, 40 years ago, they would sell it in pure form for insecticide, but it's too dangerous to even let loose in the environment anymore. But here's the 2 products right here. Colgate and Crest.
Yeah, fluoride?
Yeah. Sodium fluoride is one of the most hazardous, one of the most dangerous substances known to man. And it says right on the box, right here, that if you swallow it, you should call poison control. That if you swallow it, you should call poison control. That if you swallow it, you should... Well, what about a little swab under the tongue? You already told me you wouldn't do it.
Well, they get in these systems.
There's lots, especially for children, there's lots of medications that it says put under the tongue. Because that mucous membrane instantly puts it in your bloodstream. Instantly. Hiding in plain sight, that's the point. Thank you, Clyde. And here's your copy of your book. If I can get it without knocking off everything here. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your help. Hiding things in plain sight, that's the point. If you can't keep it locked up in secret, you hide it in plain sight. Colgate and Crest, there's probably more of that toothpaste sold than any 2 brands in the country. And it says right on the box that if you swallow the product, to call poison control. First time I did this, and it was live on the air on a radio show. And it was a live call-in show. This lady calls in about a half hour after I made this little presentation. And she says, John, I went to my medicine cabinet, and it says right on the tube, just like you said, call poison control if you swallow it. Here's a couple of things that are hiding in plain sight to make this point. We've all heard the Catholic Church and the Vatican. Of course, the Vatican and the Catholic Church is a country. A lot of people don't think about it, but it is a country. They have their own postage stamps, for example. The Vatican also has, maybe I should use past tense, they had a library open every working day for centuries, up until July of 2007. Now Rome is 80, 100 miles from the ocean, from the Mediterranean Sea. But it's not very high above sea level. In July of 2007, the Vatican announced that they were closing the Vatican Library. It had not been closed in centuries. Hiding it in plain sight. The reason they gave, the publicly stated reason, was that we have a structural problem in this building and we got to correct that. We're going to shut down the library. It will be reopened in 2010. By 2010, ladies and gentlemen, it will be someplace else. In fact, it's probably already in the process of being moved. Here's another example of something being hidden in plain sight. And then we have most people in this audience either have internet access or know somebody that does. You put this in Google, CIA in Denver. CIA in Denver, in Google. And you'll find that public announcements from the CIA, going back into 2007, that they're moving their entire domestic division from Langley, Virginia, which is about 85 feet above sea level, to Denver, Colorado. Now, the first publicly stated reason was kind of silly, and they got tired of being laughed at, so they stopped stating that. I'll tell you what that is in a moment. What they're saying right now is quote-unquote for operational reasons. That's the publicly stated reason now. The original reason, we want to break up the old boy network that's been in place for so many decades in the CIA so things will run better. Nobody believed that. That was just too silly. My contacts inside the CIA said, John, we're just scratching our heads. And that's before they got my information. We don't know why we're being moved. They're not telling us. They're not telling us. They're just saying, if you want your career and you want your pension, pack your bags and go to Denver. Otherwise, your career is toast. EPA, our friends. Now, a lot of people make fun of the EPA and hate the EPA. But like most government agencies, most of the people that work there are good men and women with good intentions, including a lot of scientists. The EPA had a library, past tense, until 2007. The library containing the largest collection of cross-referenced, important term, cross-referenced articles and manuscripts on man-made compounds and biological agents in the English language. In 2007, it was closed. The EPA library was closed, and it was a number of different locations around the country, closed to even EPA scientists could not access it. Anybody see Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth? Okay, once again, I encourage people to watch this movie. There's some science in there, there's some science fiction. The science is about what will happen in the future, abrupt climate change and rising ocean levels. The science fiction is what's causing it. It's not man-made greenhouse gases, like he says. That's a distraction. And that tactic was decided on many, many years ago, sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, that they would use that as the pretext to keep people thinking things are going to be okay. The science leaves out something, and the science fiction adds something. Al Gore gives a timeline for when these events are going to happen. Abrupt climate change and rising ocean levels. The timeline that Al Gore gives in his movie is the same timeline that the federal government gives out through the NASA Goddard Space Flight Institute. Say that fast 10 times. The NASA Goddard Space Flight Institute, which the Queen, Her Majesty, visited last spring when she was in this country, by the way, because she's got taking a sudden interest in science. Jim Hansen is the director of the NASA Goddard Space Flight Institute, and the timeline he puts out and the timeline Al Gore puts out is the exact same timeline, and here it is. It's kind of clever what they did in the movie, the way they said it. But in 2016, things will start to get bad, abrupt climate change and rising ocean levels. And then about 2050, things will really get bad, abrupt climate change and rising ocean levels. The exact same timeline put out by the federal government through NASA. NASA's part of the military, by the way. If you notice, these space flight shuttles go up, captain this, lieutenant that, colonel, I mean, it's the military. It's always been the military. That's the official timeline put up by the federal government. Now, the real timeline. I found out through my confidential sources what the real timeline is, and I found out why they're doing what they're doing right now, moving